Hello, everyone, and welcome to Groundwater Talk Live. I'm your host, Tom Beller, the Groundwater Guy, and today our topic is part two of our series on the aquifers of Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. We're going to talk the geopolitical situation today. Last week we discussed the hydrogeology, and today we're going to get into the geopolitics. So that's what we're doing today. But before we get going here, I just ask you to, if you like this material, like, comment, and share. It helps us get the word out, get some more subscribers, and I think the information is interesting, and we try to bring you interesting stuff on the topic of water and groundwater. So it helps us get the word out there. So I answer all the comments. So if you got any comments, please let me know, and we'll get those answered. All right, so let's dive in here. I guess it's no secret that the Israelis and the Palestinians don't like each other much. Probably no hiding that at this point. So, and we certainly have the present conflict going on, but it has. But when it comes to water and the geopolitics of water, it goes way back. And as if Steve Kalule reminded me on LinkedIn today that the roots of the water conflicts in the Israel area go back to biblical days, and Genesis 26 in particular discusses the disputes between Isaac and some local tribes. On Isaac was very effective at finding water and digging wells, and so there was a lot of disputes about that, and he just kept finding more, and but there was disputes with his neighbors, and so it goes all the way back to biblical times, and here we are today, and we got the conflict, and obviously there's more going on than just water, but water is a big part of it. So let's dive into some slides here, and and this is our topic here: geopolitics of water, and it's our sometimes topic. And like I say, we're discussing the aquifers of Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. Mainly, the aquifers there are going to be the mountain aquifer system and the coastal aquifer system. We went into great detail on the hydrogeology last week, but today we're really going to discuss the geopolitical situation. And so, what we're going to look at a little bit, we're going to touch here is the background, the history of the agreements that cover water in these areas. And you'll hear these areas, West Bank and Gaza and Golan Heights also, which is not part of our discussion today, is called the Occupied Palestinian Territories, or OPTs. That may slip in there. I'm trying to do something that's a little unbiased here when we talk about this, but there's no getting away from the fact that a lot of the information comes from the Palestinian side on the water, and so you're going to hear some language and stuff that may reflect some of that, and my intention is not to get into that, or picking sides or anything like that, but to really cover what's going on with actually the geopolitics and some of the realities of the situation, and that we'll get into that when we talk about how these water resources are developed between Israel and the Palestinians as well. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about what geopolitics is in the first place. We go to the definition, and it's really the study of Earth's geography on politics and international relations. So conflicts and political power between geographic space, which is usually countries, but could be, territories like we're talking about here. We have West Bank and we have Gaza. These are really territories and that are occupied by the Palestinians, in some cases the Israelis. That's the source of the conflict. And so we're having some conflicts here, and so geopolitics is kind of tends to focus more on the conflicts or you know or disputes, but really it is about relations, and sometimes it can get into peaceful situations as well, and how these negotiations are made. So that's really the what geopolitics is all about. So, and when we get into water, geopolitics is certainly the water comes under the, especially when we have transboundary aquifers, water can definitely be a big component of the geopolitical scene. So, because water resources often cross political boundaries, these are the transboundary aquifers we talked about, or rivers, lakes, for example. Upstream riparian states may have leverage over downstream states due to control over water resources. So you're upstream, you build a dam and you shut off the water or restrict water flow to downstream. Now you got a geopolitical situation. Groundwater can be even more complex to manage in a geopolitical context since it's harder to measure and apportion than surface water because it's underground. It varies a little bit about on the hydrogeology, and so it can be a little more challenging. We have to deal with recharge, drilling wells, how it gets abstracted, and groundwater can be more challenging than surface water, which is relatively straightforward. And of course, nothing is ever straightforward when you get into the geopolitical arena, but groundwater can be especially complex, and we will see that here. Um, with greater water scarcity, the risk of conflict over water resources increases, and obviously there's a lot of pressure worldwide on water resources. And so that when you have transboundary aquifers, that makes for a challenging situation, and water is indeed a critical geopolitical resource. In some cases, it's been weaponized in conflicts, and we will see a little bit of that going on here in the Gaza Strip and West Bank. And some would argue that the Israelis have really weaponized water, and we'll see some evidence of that, or at least what people claim is going on there. So it can certainly be weaponized, and water is a vital resource. Obviously, we can't survive without it, and so there you go. It can be the basis for conflicts, and it certainly does play into the current conflict between Hamas and Israel and Gaza, when Israel shut off the water. And Gaza is totally dependent on, pretty much completely dependent on Israel for their water, because the aquifer system in Gaza is pretty much contaminated and not fit for consumption in most cases. So they're pretty well dependent on Israel for their water, and you shut off the water, it's dire straits. So that is certainly geopolitics at play right there. But on the flip side, the geopolitics of water can also involve cooperation, sustainable management of shared water resources to promote peace and stability. And we would hope eventually we can reach that situation here in Israel, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because like I say, there's no love lost between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So as long as we have conflict there, we probably don't have much room for resolution on the water situation. We'll see what some of the challenges are as we dive in here. So, all right. So groundwater basins, just to recap a little bit from last week, there are a number of groundwater basins in Israel and OPT is occupied Palestinian territories. That's basically West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, is what's referred to as the OPT. And you can see there's a number of groundwater basins in the area. Probably the most important aquifer system in Israel and West Bank is the mountain aquifer system here. So we're going to focus our geopolitical situation today on the mountain aquifer system, which is basically mostly pretty good water. So it's a great groundwater resource, and basically the supply for most of Israel as far as the groundwater source goes, and then the coastal aquifer system, which is not such good water. So that creates a whole different situation there. And it creates different types of problems in both situations that we'll dive into here. Um, Here are the two aquifer systems, or at least looking at. You can see the West Bank there. We have the mountain aquifer system is divided into the northern aquifer, the western aquifer, and the eastern aquifer. It's basically an anticlinal system in limestone, so it's mostly a karstic type of aquifer. Now the coastal aquifer system, which runs along the coast, coincidentally enough, um, which is covers all of Gaza Strip and runs all the way up to Lebanon and into Egypt. Um, Really, that's going to be more of an alluvial aquifer and semi-consolidated to consolidated alluvial and sedimentary rocks is what makes up that aquifer. So a little bit different. Also, something that's important here you can see in red is the pipeline system or the distribution system for water in Israel, and you can see how that runs, and that plays an important role in how the water gets distributed between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So definitely in favor of Israel, the way these things are set up. And so that does play a role here. So, all right, so this shows the mountain aquifer shown here in the orange and the brown colors. That's where it's actually outcropping and exposed. The important thing to take into account here is the cross-hatched area there, which is right up in here, and um, that is a situation where that is the most productive part of that aquifer. So on the western limb of that anticline is the most productive part of the western or of the mountain aquifer system, and where Israel gets a lot of their water, and certainly a source of dispute here. So, all right. Water well locations, and I know this can be a little hard to see, but the point is the green here is Palestinian wells, and the kind of orange brown colors are Israeli wells. You can see where they are grouped there. The Israeli wells, that's the most productive part of the aquifer, and really that when you get out there, you can see that there is some Palestinian wells around some settlements there, and that's certainly been a challenge. So the Israelis have developed these water resources pretty well. Palestinians not so much. So it's challenging for the Palestinians to get water under the current set of agreements and systems. So available water resources. We touched on this a little last week, but I'm just going to kind of recap that. You can see the different aquifer systems there and the surface water. So we're looking at the total water resources, and you can see kind of how it's split out between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and then the Israeli settlements, which are going to be in the occupied territory. So also you can see total recharge this is an important number because both the mountain aquifer system and definitely the coastal aquifer are overdrafted aquifers. So the coastal aquifer is substantially overdrafted, which is there's already a pollution problem there, but that has resulted, the overdrafting has resulted in lowering groundwater levels and seawater intrusion issues, which certainly makes things challenging. And the water is basically undrinkable. They still use a lot of it for agriculture, but so that's a disparity between the recharge and the use. Now we will see that With the advent of, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but with the advent of the desalination systems in Israel, that is actually producing fresh water from seawater, and that is then reducing the amount of water that ends up getting taken from the mountain aquifer system, and is actually helping balance that aquifer. So bringing the groundwater basin back into balance, which is important because obviously there's a lot of dangers to drafted aquifers, pollution being one of them, lowering groundwater levels, drying up wells. So and that obviously can't go on forever. So the fact that Israel is moving more to desalination and taking less groundwater allows the mountain aquifer to recharge and keep things in balance. So um, Palestinian Israeli water consumption here. Total population of the Palestinians about 3.8 million. Total population of Israelis in these areas almost 7 million. And so the way things break out is we can see the agriculture, um, uh, domestic use, and industrial use weighted very heavily in terms of the Israelis. So the Israelis, and this is going to be in, I believe, a million cubic meters per year is going to be the consumption. So we're used to gallons here in the U.S., but they measure it in millions of cubic meters. So annual per capita consumption. Also, a very big difference here. So, domestic 40 gallons per year, or 40 cubic meters per year, and for the Palestinians, and you can see that it's basically 3 times that for the Israelis. So this is certainly a subject of controversy, and so. It's just very instructive when you can see the per capita consumption wildly different between the Israelis and the Palestinians. There are some reasons for that, and that we'll dive into here in a little bit. So, water-related agreements. Now, these are the agreements that basically for the two sets of Oslo Accords in 90 and 93 and 95 really were overall agreements that especially in 95, water was part of that. The original Oslo Accords, not so much, but we can go all the way back to 1967 when the Israelis first occupied the West Bank and Gaza, I believe was 67 also. And they basically took over the water management at that point. So the 93 and 95 Oslo Accords were an attempt really to uh, codify the water situation, and then in 2015 there was an agreement on water delivery to Gaza. That agreement was renewed in 2017. So the original Oslo Accords in 1993, they were the first face-to-face agreement between the government of Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the PLO. Um, it set up a framework for the Palestinians to govern themselves in the West Bank and Gaza, and enabled mutual recognition between the newly established Palestinian Authority, which, you know, a lot of these Palestinian organizations, but the Palestinian Authority uh, basically included the PLO, if I understand things correctly. But the Palestinian Authority was really the governing structure, and so it created a relationship between the Palestinian Authority and Israel's government. So this was the first formalization of that agreement. In 95, they went back and they had the Israeli Palestinian Interim Agreement, also known as Oslo II. So that was in 1995. This now specifically addressed water. So the Water Agreement, Annex 3, Appendix 1, Article 40, if you want to get formal about it, stipulated how the parties must act with regard to West Bank water resources. This did not include Gaza. It basically looked at the West Bank because the aquifer is bigger. It's a better aquifer, and so a lot of importance was attached to this. So really, this established a framework which was meant to be temporary for 5 years, but due to the political tensions, the geopolitical tensions, I should say, that agreement is that, the Joint Water Committee, which was established under the Oslo II agreement, uh, still exists, and it keeps on keeping on, and probably not going to be changed anytime soon, given the current geopolitical situation there. So anyway, in this agreement, Israel recognized Palestinian water rights, which should have been negotiated in the permanent status negotiations, but gotten there was some. It was addressed here. Not a perfect agreement by any stretch of the imagination, and because it was meant to be temporary and replaced by a more permanent um, set of functions to manage the water there, but here we are. It persists, especially the Joint Water Committee continues to persist. Now, in 2015, there was the agreement on water delivery to Gaza, and that followed a meeting of the Israeli Palestinian Joint Water Committee on March 14, 2015. And Israel announced the doubling of water delivery to Gaza beginning in mid 2015. Now, remember, the aquifer in Gaza, not part of the Oslo II agreement, but the water there is pretty poor quality, and without water deliveries from Israel, then they're in pretty dire straits, because that water is just not 90 to 95% of the coastal aquifer system in the Gaza Strip is not drinkable water. It's not fit for human consumption. I think it still gets drunk in some cases, but generally it doesn't meet drinking water standards. Now, there's some more recent desalination plants in the area. As I understand it, there's three desalination plants located on the Gaza Strip, if I understand correctly. I don't know the status of those, how much they produce. I had a little trouble getting that information for this talk, but I know there's some desalination that helps too. But in the current conflict, one of the first things the Israelis did was shut off the electricity, which obviously shuts down the desalination plants, and then shut off the water too. So there was definitely an immediate water crisis in Gaza. So we see the effects of that. So, but getting back to this agreement in 2015, the Israeli authorities decided to increase the amount of water sent to Palestinian territories from 5 million cubic meters per year to 10 million to combat the water crisis in the region. And so basically a doubling of the water allocation to the Palestinian territories. So that's good news. They're still don't have sufficient water resources, but this was moving in the right direction. And the last real agreement that addresses specific water was in 2017, and that's basically a renewal of that last agreement we talked about. So in January 15th, 2017, Israel's coordinator of government activity in the territories, Major General Yoav Mordecai, and the Palestinian Authority's Minister of Civil Affairs, Hussein al-Sheikh, signed an agreement to renew the cooperation defined in the 2015 agreement. So that is kind of where we're at the present moment. So the main provisions of all these agreements in place basically talk about Palestinian water rights in the West Bank. So the Israeli-Palestinian Interim Agreement, that's Oslo II from 1995, recognized Palestinian water rights in the West Bank, and these rights were to be negotiated in the permanent status agreement, which never happened. So, joint water management was another part of this agreement. The agreements established the Israeli-Palestinian Joint Water Committee, or JWC, to manage water and sewer-related infrastructure in the West Bank. And the JWC was responsible for decisions on maintenance of the existing infrastructure and approval of new projects. This can be a little bit of a challenge, as we'll see in a little bit, because this tends to be dominated by the Israelis. There's some other components here, and makes it difficult for the Palestinians to develop their own infrastructure, and so they lag behind the Israelis. So. Water allocation and distribution as part of these agreements. The agreement stipulated that all new water projects would require authorization from the Israeli Central Authority. This tends to be the crux of the problem when it comes to the Palestinians, because um, that that authorization is not forthcoming all the time. So the Palestinian Water Authority had approved all Israeli applications for new water supply facilities for West Bank settlements, while Israel had vetoed every application from Palestine for new wells in the western basin of the mountain aquifer, and delayed approval of other applications for as many as 8 years. So while this was a main provision, it really did not play out equitably here. So this is one of the provisions. It's also one of the challenges. Infrastructure agreement development. Israel agreed to provide better water access to Palestinian towns and villages to develop and modernize the water infrastructure in the West Banks. The two sides also agreed to explore new infrastructure projects to meet the expected demand as the Palestinian population grows. This is another area that has not really come to fruition. The infrastructure for the Palestinians has really lagged behind that of the Israelis. So where the fault lies in that, I can't parcel the blame, but it is buried in bureaucracy as it comes down, because you have several authorities that need to approve things. Sometimes that authority is that permission is denied, and so the Palestinian side of the infrastructure lags behind. The Palestinians do not seem to be really good at developing their own infrastructure anyway, but there's a lot of pressure from Israel. So this is some of the roots of the conflict. Obviously, there's more here besides just water, but water really does come into play, as you can see here, and it's a big deal. So future negotiations on water rights. The agreement recognized that water is crucial, obviously, and the final status issue for the broader Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiation process. So they're recognizing that water is a crucial part of the geopolitical situation there. So reaching a mutually acceptable agreement on water rights is an essential component of a viable two-state solution. Read that again. It's an essential component of a viable two-state solution. There has, since the 2017 agreement on extending the agreement, there really has been nothing done on this. And until they resolve the water issues, that's going to be, a stumbling block for anything else. Now, obviously, with the current conflict, everything is on hold, and probably, who knows how this is going to play out. It could play out horribly. It's not going to be a good situation no matter what happens at this point. So the question is, how bad is it really going to be? That's our situation. But future negotiations on water rights. This was a promise there. Probably not going to be fulfilled for a very long time. Okay, so despite these agreements, cooperation over water between Israel and the Palestinians is currently in a deadlock due to persisting bilateral tensions. And I'll go back to my opening statement. Palestinians and Israelis do not like each other much. So coming to an agreement is very challenging, but in the long run, water is going to be an important component of however things shake out here. It's all up in the air right now. I have some fears about what could happen there. It's all up in the air right now, but water, whatever happens, water is going to be a huge component of that. And safeguarding the water resources they have, especially in the mountain aquifer system, which is a big producer and has good quality water, that's going to play out in any geopolitical solutions between Israel and the Palestinians. So we have some challenges. The political obstacles, obviously, the antagonism between Israel and the Palestinians has really stymied any further agreements and any promises that were made, dating back to Oslo too. It's just been stymied. So there's a deadlock going on. So the agreements have also been criticized for not addressing the division in the West Bank into areas A, B, and C when arranging water distribution. We'll talk about these divisions here in just a minute, but this is a huge deal, a big stumbling block, and a big point of contention. So we'll look at that in just a minute here. So water infrastructure, the Palestinian territories face significant challenges in terms of water infrastructure, whether they don't have the funding, they have trouble getting approval from the Israelis through the bureaucratic system. So the Palestinian water infrastructure is very undeveloped in the West Bank, and it just shows in that water consumption numbers we looked at earlier. I mean, that's basically a reflection of the water infrastructure. There's been instances of illegal well digging by Palestinians in the West Bank that haven't been approved through the bureaucratic process, and that negatively impacts the availability and distribution capacity of water to both Israelis and Palestinians, because now you're overdrafting the aquifer and you're not managing the water appropriately. So Palestinians have been criticized for overwatering their crops, using outdated methods, leading to water wastage, used in leakage and mismanagement. So instead of using really efficient drip irrigation, they're using older irrigation type methods, and so that, where water is a critical infrastructure or a critical issue, then you got to be efficient in your water use. So this is a legitimate criticism, and the Palestinians really need to invest in more efficient water management methods. The problem is, do they have the financial wherewithal to do that? And that's a big part of the problem. Most of these people are pretty darn poor, subsistence farmers, and so investing in a nice slick drip irrigation system may be beyond their means, even though it would result in more efficient water use. So that is a challenge. Security concerns, obviously, when so we had a question here, and you can't see it on the screen very well here, but are the operation failure? Let me see if I can move that around a little. Well, I can't move that very well. So, are the operation failures in Gaza and West Bank due to pipeline tapping or deterioration? I think there's some deterioration, especially on the Palestinian side. A lot of the Israeli infrastructure, fairly new, so more well maintained. Palestinian infrastructure, not as well maintained. I have no information about pipeline tapping. Probably would not surprise me. I mean, that happens in California. It happens all over the place, people tapping pipelines. So it would not surprise me, but I have no information on pipeline tapping. But I would guess that you're probably in the Palestinian areas, their infrastructure, you probably have some deterioration, and you probably have some water losses there as well from line leaks. So that would be my guess. I did not find any information on that, but that is an interesting question. Thank you. So anyway, so back to security concerns. The obviously water is important, and that's why when in 1967, when Israel occupied the West Bank, they secured the water. That was one of the first things they did, and they have managed the water from here on out. And so that's a security issue for the Israeli people. So they have maintained the control over the water resources and the water related infrastructure since 1967. All right, settlements and land control. Israeli settlements in the West Bank are obviously a sore point. Uh, there's a lot of people that would argue that those settlements are illegal. That's you know that's a topic. That's a whole other topic, I guess. But the Israeli settlements. But here's the difference in the infrastructure is the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Whether you can consider them illegal or not, they're there. Uh, they have a sophisticated network that provides them continuously, but Palestinian cities do not have the same infrastructure. So basically, the Palestinians have sporadic water supply, especially during the summer, which gets very hot there. They do not have the same level of infrastructure, and whether that is lack of their financial situation, they do seem to have a fair number of people that are well versed in water resources. There is a number of groups that help them, but developing and maintaining this infrastructure gets slowed down by the bureaucratic process, especially on the Israeli side. But it may just be the financial wherewithal to maintain that infrastructure. Water scarcity and allocation. The Oslo Accords and subsequent agreements allowed Israel to maintain control over the water resources in the region, which they have maintained since 1967. And the Israelis basically are able to consume more water while the Palestinians are limited to a predetermined allocation. So this is inequitable distribution of the water. So there's a water scarcity in much of the West Bank, especially not so much for the Israelis, but for the Palestinians. So that has to do with the actual allocation. Management of the West Bank water resources. The water related agreements between the Israelis and Palestinians establish a complex system of managing resource in the West Bank area, and this is complex. It's decidedly more favorable to the Israelis and been unevenly administered in terms of the Palestinians. That's probably a little generous. Yeah, the Palestinians have kind of suffered under this. So the present management system divides the West Bank into a series of areas, each of which has somewhat different permitting requirements and administration. So this then is really the challenge and the crux of the problem in the West Bank area. The West Bank water divisions, the 1995 Oslo, I guess 97 Oslo II Accord. I got the wrong date in there. Sorry about that. Established the no, that's right, 95. So 93, 95. So established the administrative division of the Palestinian West Bank into areas A, B, and C as a transitional arrangement pending a final status agreement. Well, we've already talked about the fact that they're still in this transitional agreement, probably not going to ever get out of that. So there is not probably going to be a final status. So these water divisions are going to remain for the foreseeable future. So Oslo II intended for the divisions to be temporary, as we've said, with full jurisdiction of all three areas gradually transferred to the Palestinian Authority over time. That has obviously not happened and probably is unlikely to happen. So instead, the divisions persist with Area A administered by the Palestinian Authority, Area B under joint control, and Area C is administered by Israel. So what do these look like? So these are the administrative areas for water resources on the West Bank. So Area A. Yeah, Zendrius99 says it's very saddening to see people resorting to saline water when rationing water for consumption is not sufficient. And I would draw a distinction between Gaza, which has a real problem with pollution, both nitrates and saltwater intrusion, is where they have that problem. The mountain aquifer that we're kind of talking about right now, really it's more just the allocation system that is creating the problem. So the deliveries to the Palestinians as a Palestinian problem or population continues to grow, the allocations increased in 2015, but there's a fixed allocation. While the Israelis get basically the water they need, the Palestinians are limited to the fixed allocation. So basically, they can't even resort to saline water, so they're drilling some illegal wells, which get shut down by the Israelis when they find out about them, and so it's just a matter of just no water. So they have to decrease their consumption down to the minimum. So, all right. So the water divisions here, we can see Area A is the green areas. These the administered by the Palestinians. These are Palestinian cities. Area B is joint administration between the Israelis and the Palestinians. This is going to be Palestinian villages, and Area C is administered by Israel. That constitutes the vast bulk of the area in the West Bank. So this is kind of how it breaks down. Area A, basically 18%, administered by the Palestinian Authority. Area B, 22%, administered by the Palestinian Authority and shared security control with Israel. And Area C, it's 60%. That is completely controlled by Israel. So basically, the way these break out is Area A under the terms of the Oslo II agreement. It's under Palestinian administrative and police control, constitutes 18% of the West Bank. It is the most densely populated areas in the West Bank, mainly by the Palestinian cities. Area B, Palestinian Authority exercises administrative control, but shares security control with Israeli authorities. This is this bureaucratic process, and it gets complicated. It really does. And the majority of Palestinians in the West Bank live in areas A or B. So, and they're not contiguous. They're separated by Area C, which is completely under the control of Israel. So this further stymies the Palestinians' development of their water resources. It becomes a bureaucratic nightmare is what it does. So Area C, which Israel administers, covers over 60% of the West Bank. 30% of Area C is designated as military training areas. So this is completely off limits. So in Area C, there's an estimated 300,000 Palestinians with some 400,000 Israeli settlers. So, and more than 70% of communities in Area C are not connected to a water network and rely on tankered water. And I would guarantee that 70% is pretty much all Palestinians. So it is kind of a bureaucratic nightmare, as you can see. The permitting system, let's talk about that. How can you drill wells? So the permit process for Palestinians to drill a water well, it's complex, it's fraught with challenges, and it really ends up being almost impossible. So after the occupation of the West Bank in 1967, the Israeli military authorities consolidated complete power over all water resources and water-related infrastructure in the West Bank. So Israel basically took that over after the 1967 occupation. Operating water wells in the West Bank require the approval of the Joint Water Committee, the JWC that we talked about earlier, as well as permits provided by the Israeli Civil Administration, or the ICA. So you can start to see how this gets complicated and really is weighted in favor of the Israelis. The 1995 interim agreement, Oslo II, basically allowed the Palestinian Authority to develop and maintain water wells in Area B and Area A. That comprises about 40% of the West Bank, on the condition, and this is a big caveat, that Israel agrees to the location and the size of each well. This agreement is not often forthcoming. So, Palestinian water projects located in Area C of the West Bank, which comprises 60% of the territory, must also obtain a permit from the Israeli Civil Administration, or ICA. So the ICA permits are characterized by long delays, frequent rejections, and it makes it almost impossible for the Palestinians to drill new wells in Area C. And that's generally going to cover, we saw the extraction areas on that map earlier. Those are basically going to be in Area C. That's where the best water extraction points are located on the western slope of the west of the mountain aquifer, and so it makes it almost impossible for Palestinians to drill there or even rehabilitate old wells to keep them running. So this is a challenge. So in addition to the approval, and we're seeing the bureaucratic process here from the JWC and the permit from ICA, Palestinians must also navigate a complex system of permits from the Israeli military authorities. That's in Area C. So the system was established in 1967 and requires the Palestinians to obtain a number of separate permits for a wide range of activity, including the construction of any new water installation. So it's stacked against the Palestinians. It's a very bureaucratic process, and approval is generally not forthcoming in a lot of cases. So, and as I said, it's difficult. Between 1907 and 1996, only 13 permits were issued, and between 2010 and 2016, Palestinians received approval for only 2 new water wells. That's not much. So you can see this is quite the challenge to get water to the Palestinians. So they have the allocation from Israel. It's almost impossible for them to develop new wells for their own, so they're kind of stuck with the allocation. So challenges, difficulties are numerous. The Israelis often deny permits, and even when they're granted, the process can be protracted and very bureaucratic. Anytime you have to go through 3 different agencies that are not, because the Palestinians and Israelis are not on friendly terms, it becomes a nightmare, and we can see that reflected here. So, all right, so that is the mountain aquifer system. Let's touch briefly on the coastal aquifer, which is the Gaza Strip area. Now, the coastal aquifer in the Gaza Strip, as I mentioned, poor quality water. They extract water from wells for agriculture, but only about 5 to 10% of the water in the coastal aquifer system in the Gaza Strip is drinkable water. So, like I said, there are some desalination plants. What their capacity is and how new they are, I think they're all fairly new. But what their capacity is, I don't know. I didn't have good information on that. So, but I believe they may not be. They're probably not operating now, of course, but they have been put in place for that reason. So the Gaza Strip does not. It's easier to drill a well in the Gaza Strip, but why would you want to drill a well if you can't drink the water? So you may be able to use it for agriculture, but if it's saline water, it's not going to be real great for your crops anyway. So these are some of the challenges. But so basically, you can pretty well say that the Gaza Strip does not have any of their own water from groundwater. How much the desalination plants are supplying, I think the desalination plants are run by Israel. If I'm not, I could be wrong on that, so I don't know. But I suspect that is the case. But as we've seen during the present conflict, when Israel cut off their water, there's no water other than that. So this is the challenge. They're pretty much completely reliant on Israel for their water, and it is a dire situation if Israel cuts off their water. Now, Israel did turn their water back on. I think they recognized that was pretty inhumane, and people obviously can't Uh, yeah. Um, Zendrius99 says, I don't think there's fuel for desalination plants, although I think they run on electricity, but obviously you have to have electricity, which comes from Israel too. Even if there was, most resources are controlled by the Hamas militia. And this is true. Hamas has a big say in what goes on in the Gaza Strip. So, and no love lost between Hamas and Israel, obviously, and the people that are living there, and there's a lot of people living in Gaza Strip, are affected by this every day. It's a tough situation. It really is. No matter which side you come down on, you have to recognize the fact that the Gaza people are poor, and it's just not a good situation there. And something has to give eventually. I don't know what it's going to be, and there just does not seem to be any solutions, and no will to come up with a solution. And so we just end up with the military conflicts breaking out every now and then, and no resolution of the problems. And I think that's just gonna go on. I think that's really the situation. All right, so the Gaza and the coastal aquifer system, as I said, 90 to 95% of the groundwater is part of the coastal aquifer system and is not fit for drinking. So um, Gaza relies almost completely on Israel for their drinking water supply. The permitting process for drilling new wells is less restrictive than the West Bank, but what's the point if the water quality is poor and not drinkable? So there's really no competition with Israel for the poor quality water. So Israel's saying take all you want, but obviously even as it is, they're taking all they want for agriculture, but it is creating an overdraft situation that is further creating problems with saltwater intrusion, which further degrades the water quality. So that is problematic. So basically, the coastal aquifer system is going to eventually become useless, just even for agriculture too. So this is quite the challenge. So, but simpler situation in the Gaza Strip, but still fraught with its own set of problems. All right. So the bottom line here is Israel generally holds all the cards on the management of the West Bank aquifer groundwater resources, and surface water too. In spite of the intent of the water agreements, they have never been finalized. We're still in a temporary status since 1995. So Gaza is highly dependent on Israel for drinking water due to the poor quality water there. And current disputes between the Palestinians and Israel make any near-term water solutions pretty unlikely I'd say for years to come. This current situation has the potential to spiral out of control and pull us all into World War III. So we don't want that to happen, but certainly it's going to tank any negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis in terms of increasing water deliveries to the Palestinians. So that I have this may be a little hard to read, but here's kind of a quick summary too. You can see the different the coastal aquifer system there in Gaza, the water distribution pipelines for Israel, and then the mountain aquifer system that's divided into the North Aquifer, the West Aquifer, and the East Aquifer, and some numbers down below just on the Palestinian utilization of water. These are a little bit different format than I showed you earlier, but that's basically the situation there. So, all right. So that is the show today. The situation in Israel, West Bank, and Gaza is a challenging situation. There's no doubt about it. When it comes to geopolitics, this is the poster child for geoconflicts. And we didn't have time today to get into things like the all the different proposals and things that are on the table there. I read a bunch of papers to prepare for this, and maybe I'll do a different show on that at some point. Some of the conflict resolution and the water frameworks that have been put out there as proposals, and they all seem to go nowhere. There really has been nothing done on that front. You know, in terms of new proposals since 2010, you know, other than the 2017 agreement, which was based on some of this earlier work, I haven't seen any papers published since 2010 that have any significant proposals in them. There may have been one from earlier this year, but maybe we'll have to do another show on that and just kind of go over those and look at potential resolutions. So that is the show. I appreciate you coming. I am Tom Ballard, the groundwater guy. If you have any comments, please comment on the videos. You can also email me. Here's my email address here. If you would like to be a guest on Groundwater Talk Live to come on and talk about shows. Andreas99 says, thanks for this presentation, really insightful. So thank you for coming and attending and commenting and being involved. I really appreciate. I like it when people pop in and comment during the show. It doesn't interrupt me at all. I appreciate that. So if you'd like to be a guest, here's the link to set up to come on the show. I'd love to have you if you're a groundwater expert in a topic. You know, we cover a whole range of topics, not just geopolitics, but operating water systems. So come on the show. Let's see here. All right. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel where all my videos are at. I stream into LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube, but all my videos are there on the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel, so you can see them all there. I got over 120 videos at this point, so something for everybody. Love it if you could subscribe. I really appreciate that. That helps me. And we do this every Thursday, 11 a.m. Central Time. So I will look forward to seeing you next.